Always happy to be here at future branches. Really happy to be in person, seeing people, real live people. And the idea of seeing real live people is actually what I'm going to talk about today. We have spoken in the past at this event about a lot of data, a lot of strategies, a lot of methodologies, and there'll be a little bit of that today, but I'm going to get into what do you actually do, because you have to do things now. The time is now. And I'll begin by saying at future branches that no one wants to go inside a branch, but everyone wants to have one nearby. And that is the biggest conundrum in banking. A Keynote paper that just came out said that very thing. So what do you do about this conundrum? One interesting thing that happened in the pandemic, it didn't kill branches and actually brought about a renaissance, so to speak, in their usage. This is data from a Radin study at the end of last year. In blue is online banking, high and climbing. In gray is mobile banking, climbing a lot. But in black is lobby and branch banking, and interestingly, it dipped between 2019 and up to 2020 at 77% of people using the channel at least monthly and has held steady at 77%. Also interestingly are the cohorts of people that are using the branch, and you'll see circled there, it is the millennials. The millennials. Millennials are about late 20s to early 40s. They are not only the biggest increase in usage, but they're the biggest overall users, not the boomers, the millennials, and also those same millennials. This was kind of fascinating. There was a big shift in their perception of what a bank branch should be. So, yes, it is a place to conduct transactions. That continues to be the main thing, but look at the shift in blue of millennials changing from a place to conduct transactions to a place to get advice. And alongside that, Gen Zers, I know you don't want to think about them, but they're like in their 20s and have jobs and are real people now. They actually want to use the branch too. They are saying 30% of them that the importance of a branch post-pandemic is more important than it was before, because they need advice more than ever. So the purpose is shifting. And what do you do in the face of needing to be more efficient? Closures, yes, you have to consider them. Last year, there was about 4,000 net closures. Metro areas were hit hard. Underserved areas were hit hard. Metros like New York, California, Chicago, Detroit, here in Boston, a lot of closures. Texas seems to be pandemic-proof. Anyone from Texas in here? Yeah, you guys are doing great. You didn't have a lot of closures, but you have to consider that, but really, you can't close your way to profitability. You have to reinvest the savings. Reinvest them in enhancements, in expansion, and reduce. And the good thing about this reduction is you can do it at the same time as you are reinvesting. Different staffing models, newer formats, and really what you want to get into after the closures, if you have to make them, is this ongoing right-sizing recalibration cycle of reinvesting and reducing and doing it at the same time. So the other good thing about what I'm talking to you about today, branch network transformation, evolution, modernization, whatever you want to call it, is that it works. It works. The blueprint has already been set. It has happened. This was a study done by BCG last year. These were larger banks in this study. They divided them into two groups, what they called efficient banks and typical banks. And the efficient banks not just closed, they transformed. All the things on the last slide. They reinvested, they used different formats, new staffing models and technology, and they reduced their cost by 39% and their FTE by 53%. If you are not a super regional bank, however, or a very, very large community bank, This works too. This was a different study that's come out this year by IDC and Fiserv about the value of branch modernization. And the ROI was staggering, 5-to-1 5-year ROI, and all kinds of ancillary benefits, faster onboarding, better member experience, better employee retention, new revenue sources, and on and on and on. So it works. And let's not forget this. This is a picture of a Synovus branch we designed. Carla from Synovus was just on the stage and said, people with online-only relationships are not real relationships with your bank. And that is true. The branch is a unique point of leverage, and you are competing with more than you've ever competed with before. Chase spent for lunch yesterday your asset size on technology upgrades. And then there's fintechs, and yes, they're kind of like an annoying thing biting at your heels, but they're like tugging your pants now. There was 270% increase last year of consumers who said that a non-bank was their primary bank, up to about 15-16% of people. That is scary, that's real. And then there's over 9,700 institutions in the company today. The branch is a unique point of leverage. It is your presence, it is your locality, and it is your human-human connection, and that is what gets people to stay and be advocates for life. So, transforming your network should not be an if. I think you're all here and hopefully know that, but really how fast. And all of you are on some journey in some capacity to transform the network, but where are you and what do you do? Getting into the meat of what I want to talk to you today about, what do you do? And I will begin by a very brief history lesson. Let's go to the beginning of banking time. Let's call it 1800. 1.0, big branches. It's the only place to go. There's like a bazillion teller lines, big columns and stuff, and big safes, and the money's in the safe, and not much change for like 150 years. Until, let's call it 2.0, around the 50s, you have the motor bank, the drive up, people have cars, you have ATMs, they weren't that cool back then, but they were a thing. And now the teller line can shrink, the safes can kind of shrink, and actually, when ATMs first came out, around 60s, 70s, people said, ooh, the bank branch will be dead. And they keep saying that, but it's not. 3.0, this is now automation is coming into play. So we've got VAT tubes. We can extend the drive up. We have ATMs that are functioning a little bit better. We have the first ever teller cash recyclers we're starting to see pop up. There's efficiencies in the back rooms. And then we get into what we're calling 4.0 universal. This is where most of you probably think of a modern branch today. This is teller cash recyclers are in there. We have dialogue banking. We have really slick ATMs. And by the way, we also have, you see in red there, a little thing that happened in the 90s called the internet. And then in the early 2000s called the smartphone. We have online banking and mobile banking. So what has happened is cash has just gone out and out and out, and the purpose of the branch has changed, and that big blue area that was meant to service transactions has now shrunk to what in present to future looks like maybe just a tiny little counter that might have a TCR just in case someone needs a transaction, but ultimately it is about connection with people. Now we have video enablement, video chat, video tellers, and ITMs. And so this is what the landscape of the history of banking looks like, and you'll see it's kind of sped up in recent years. And the funny thing about this history lesson is it is also present day. We think at Adrenaline we've touched about 40,000 branches. That's 40% of the around 100,000 branches in the country, we estimate. That this is what those models look like today as far as what branches actually are. You've got a few historic sites still in 1.0. That's okay, they're historic. 2.0, we've got probably about 8%, that is thousands and thousands of branches in this country that probably need to change. We've got the majority there right in 3.0. Stuck in 3.0. And I'll mention, we've talked here before about the idea of a North Star. It is your branch of the future, but the future is never here, so it should always be iterating and changing. Most of your North Stars are probably around 4.0, but you want to evolve them forwards and backwards. And this is a great example of a bank that did that. This is Vera Bank, great bank in Texas, that actually began with us creating a North Star, but not to expand or create new experiences, to renovate their existing. And so through a series of major minor renovations to really convert to that 4.0 universal model, save a staff and a half with each one, renovations paying for themselves, they were able to establish a new experience model and a new experience standard. And then as they acquired and expanded through M&A and organically, that was ported to new locations, new ground ups, and video tellers, ATMs only. So this is a great example of reinvesting and saving at the same time. So what do you do? This is what you do. This is the spectrum of actions that you consider. It's not just about closing or opening. It's about all these things in between. You can relocate, you can refresh a little bit, refresh a lot, a light or major renovation, and expand using these new formats. So some examples of that: closures do not necessarily mean exiting. These are some leave behind strategies. All of these banks and credit unions actually left something behind. That big picture on the left is a bank in Mississippi, very different states, Mississippi, that actually leveled branches and left behind these drive-up ITMs in their place in areas of lesser opportunity. Eastern, a bank right here in Boston, micro branch, where again they were kind of exiting the market but didn't want to exit completely, and other temporary and drive-up strategies. So closures don't necessarily mean exiting. Then there's relocations. Relocations are a thing you should consider. Absolutely. This credit union was in a great area of Birmingham. They didn't want to leave that area, but their real estate was less than ideal. And based on where your lease is, look at the new bones of, yes, there's a better design, better signage, et cetera, but they were able to improve significantly, because sometimes you're in a market, but you're not exactly in the right place in the market. You're not on the right street corner. Then there's refreshes. Look at these before and afters. This is Park National Bank in Ohio. And these refreshes were done in concert with a rebrand after a consolidation of many brands through M&A. So if you're going through M&A and you are considering or need to rebrand branches, think about some of these things are just paint or structural. You would be surprised at how affordable these changes are, but look at the difference. And along those lines of looking at the difference, this is a bank in DC, United Bank, that just with some exterior renovations was able to completely change their presence in K Street in DC. And people actually, stranger people on the street, walked into this branch and said, "Thank you, because you enhanced our neighborhood," because of what this looked like. And retailers walked in as well to say, how did you do that? We want to do that too. This was just an exterior refresh, but made a really big difference. And this same bank in DC, and by the way, this bank had been in DC, but nobody knew it. And so by amping up their presence in this way, they could actually gain market share, and they have. This example is nearby Georgetown. This was a micro branch that was opened around the same time. So now they're creating a network effect with multiple points of presence. And then there's light renovations. I showed that Vera Bank example, these renovations, removing the teller line, bringing in TCRs. You know, many of you may think you have universal staffing, but if you have not actually opened up teller lines, you are really not enabling true universal staffing and all the benefits that come with it. This bank, Fulton Bank, has done a renovation program over many years, converting piece by piece their network and saving by increasing the experience, but really just affecting largely the teller line and maybe some consultation spaces. And then there's bigger remodels. This is Penn Community Bank. And look at this, it looks like a new building. Very significant exterior changes. And Do not forget your poor, forgotten drive-up. You've got, in some cases, over half of your customers just coming through the drive-up, and especially with new technologies. You need to leverage the exterior and the interior, another great example. So, new North Star locations, here's a credit union in Wisconsin, they can, in this case, this credit union was infilling Madison, where they already were, a ton of growth in Madison right now. So they were using this to infill. Again, a very large and a great example of the drive up. I'm here to say, please make your drive ups look better. But also remember, your North Star should keep evolving. We worked with First Tennessee to design the branch on the left, and 5 years later to design the branch on the right in Miami as they were bringing together a new full bank model. This is a beautiful example of iterating your North Star experience over time. Same with Charles Schwab, about 5-6 years in between these models. They are actually going to almost entirely consulting. In this Austin branch, there's no cash in there at all. It's just about meeting with people and local community connection. And for Comerica, this is showing, yes, there's a new North Star. It's beautiful. It's small. By the way, your full-service branches don't need to be much more than 2,500 square feet. But then look at an enhanced drive-up. Look at a mobile branch on wheels. Look at an ITM only. And this is an example of true North Star strategy extended across multiple format types and self-service technology. If you haven't considered self-service technology, you must. There's different versions of it. You have to decide what's right for you. But ITMs and video enablement are changing the game for how efficient you can be. And by the way, these points of presence are about 1/8 of the CapEx and 1/8 of the OpEx of a regular branch. So they count as achieving a network effect. They count as achieving perceived presence for you, and they matter. And finally, don't not forget, there are other ways to be in the community. This is Credit Union of Texas. They've done a beautiful job of everything from event sponsorships to high school branches, multiple high school branches operated by students, to mobile on wheels, to partnering with a coffee shop that's adjacent to their branch. All of these things are real strategies in that spectrum of actions that you should be considering. So, with a few minutes left, how to do it. Okay, that looks great. I want to do all that. Where do I start? So, four easy steps. And some of these steps can even happen simultaneously to one another, but this is really how you do it. You analyze, number one. You plan, number two, including assessing your existing network conditions. You pilot. You always pilot, meaning just test out a little bit, learn from it, make it better, and then you begin extending. And so a little more about each one of those things. We've talked in the past about data. Make sure in analysis you have good data, market data, competitive data, your own data, but also a data we've been bringing in, mobility data. This is real-time people movement. It's not census. It's updated monthly, not every 10 years. Consider that. And then don't get into analysis paralysis. As you put together strategies for evolving your network, focus on what really matters. Like, okay, what's going on in the markets I'm in or I want to get in? And how does my performance stack up against my competition? What are my actual fair share gaps? What fair share could I have versus what I do? And then this is where mobility data is really good. As I'm thinking about locations to go into, how do I profile exactly where I should go by what market, what neighborhood in the market, and what street corner in the neighborhood? As you plan, think about those actions as a matrix of opportunity versus current state. Where do I invest? Where do I change? Where do I maintain? I may have cash cows that I think are killing it, but there's not actually that much opportunity in the market. Come up with a plan, branch by branch, of what you should do with a partner that can help you, because this can be overwhelming very quickly. And then create a plan. What does current state look like? What is future state? And you should be planning 5 years out with annual mini plans within that. What does expansion within my current market or a new market look like? How will I achieve critical mass? And then pilot. start designing or iterating on an existing design. Most of you have something you probably consider a branch of the future or a new branch design, but you can't push branch updates like app updates. The minute you stop designing something, it's already a year old by the time it gets in the ground. You always need to be iterating. And then after you pilot, and on that last slide showing what the design process is that leads into the ideal experience, that can scale up and down. That was done for a micro branch that then scaled up to a flagship and down to ITM onlys. And another example for a credit union showing the big difference, by the way, of how the brand manifests itself. All of these things should be unique manifestations of your brand. Unified Credit Union, look at their flagship. This is LA, very different than Mississippi. Inline and even mobile on wheels. All of them have a consistent thread and consistent elements, but they're all designed for slightly different purposes. And finally, another credit union example, Credit Union of Texas, I mentioned them earlier. This is a perfect example of in a high opportunity area of Dallas, that's where that flagship goes, where you're gonna get the most return. And it's beautiful and big, not too big, but big enough, as big as it needs to be. And then in an area nearby that's slightly less opportunistic, but still important, an end cap, it's got a drive-through, and the same design elements are exported down. And then miles away from a branch, ITM onlys that are, again, just a fraction of the cost. This combination is how you achieve maximum network presence. And I'll end with that idea of whatever you do, have a North Star experience and be thinking always about how you can go backwards and forwards at the same time. Analyze, plan, pilot, and extend. And this together is going to maximize your greatest expense and turn it into your greatest opportunity. Thank you.